How do you think the services offered by the church, like the sacraments of the Eucharist or baptism, improve or harm your relationship with God?
I think that they can improve your relationship because like through the traditions of doing it, you get to like learn because each of them have a reason like connecting to like the Bible or something. So you get to like learn more about your faith and like about who you're like believing in.
Do you think the church could do a better job helping the poor people in the world?
Yes, they definitely can help the poor people because I feel like a lot of funds may not be given to the poor. Like, you see those big, elegant churches and cathedrals, so yes, instead of doing that, maybe give some funds to the poor.
Do you find going to Mass with other Christians more helpful than praying on your own?
This one's a tough question because when you go to Mass, like let's say you go to Mass here at McCarthy, you kind of are forced to go and you kind of like follow along because everyone else is doing it too. But I feel like when you pray on your own, that's like, it shows that you're serious and that you actually you're dedicated to the Lord. So.
Do you think you have to attend church and follow all of their requirements in order to truly love Jesus?
No, and the way I look at it is, it's like if you love a sports team, do you have to go to all their games just to show your love for the team? No, you could pray at your own home.
How do you think society has affected religion and changed it to fit its views?
I think that society has had kind of a bad impact on it by putting different stereotypes on different religions and beliefs and making some religions seem more important or better than others, and I think that's bad.
I am a spiritual person. I don't need to go to church to be with God. Pointing to his heart, Terry would often say, "My religion is right here." Now, this quote from our textbook is giving us the individualistic point of view, which is saying that you can love Jesus and love God, but you don't necessarily have to go to church. Almost all of the people that we interviewed shared this perspective and said that you can love Jesus, but you don't have to go to church in order to truly follow him. St. Paul explained that just as the various parts of a human body rely on each other to function as a human body, so the members of the church must rely on each other if they are to live as God intended. Now, this is kind of contradicting the individualistic point of view, which many of our interviewees shared. It's kind of saying that we go to church as a community because it helps bring us closer. So like Julian said, we all go to church as a school. That reason is to bring us closer. So we can pray individually, but doing it as a community and working together helps us build up our relationship even more. 3 things that I learned while watching these interviews were that most people believe that the sacraments and especially confession really help build up your relationship with God. 2, that people think a relationship with Jesus is a lot more important than going to church, even if going to church really still is important. And 3, that although people do go to church and they love Jesus and they love God, they still have a lot of different opinions on how the church can improve. Some similarities throughout all of these interviews were that most all of them believe that a relationship with Jesus is more important than going to church. And some differences were that in the interviews not shown, they believed that the church could probably do a better job helping poor people, while some of them believed that the church was doing just fine. Some things that surprised me about these interviews were that all of them agreed that the sacraments, especially confession, are really important in building up your relationship with God. And that's just because a lot of teenagers today don't truly appreciate all the things that we do at church and how it can improve our relationship.
3 things I learned from the interviews were that the church can do more for the poor instead of big cathedrals that can feed others. People have different views on how society has changed the church, for better or for worse, and that followers of Jesus do not think that going to church and following all the rules and regulations means that their love for Jesus is any stronger or less. Similarities were that all the interviewers agreed that to show your love for Jesus, it can be in your own way. Differences are the way they think that society has opened their arms to the church. For example, it has made them either want new marriages and stuff or just close down and be weaker than other churches. Also, the interview responses that surprised me the most were the ones on how society has changed the church, like to make it weaker, and also that people think that praying alone is better than like going to a church with a lot of people.
What I learned from these interviews was that praying by yourself is also just as good as praying in a community because you have more like a direct connection with God. I also learned that the sacraments and everything that the church offers does help our connections with God, and that 3, society has instilled like negative stereotypes and stigmas on the church and religion as a whole. Some of the similarities were that everyone believed that you could be like a more individualistic and spiritual person by yourself instead of going to church, and that all the sacraments and things that the church offers do help you in your connection with God. Some of the differences were the viewpoints on how the church was aiding the poor, both positive and negative, and also the viewpoints on how society has affected the church and religion, either making it more inclusive or shutting it down and giving it negative stereotypes. The response that surprised me the most was when someone said that they wanted the church to stop building big cathedrals and instead put that money into helping the poor.
3 things I learned from the interviews are that going to confession helps people unburden their souls and get closer to God. The church has the power to do more and should do more to help people with their money, and that you don't need to go to Mass to truly love God. Some similarities were that everyone believed that the church could do more to help the poor, such as giving them more attention and using their money for them, no matter their conditions, and instead of using cathedrals, they would spend it on the poor. Some differences are that people believe the church has opened itself up more, while others believed it has shut itself down more. The interview that surprised me the most was the question, do you find going to Mass with other Christians more helpful than praying on your own? Because Julian provided very interesting points upon this topic. It shows how going to Mass could seem more like a chore than true love, and how if you pray by yourself, it is more personal.
3 things I learned from this project was that most people believe the church isn't necessary for a relationship with God, and that people have many different views on prayer and going to Mass, and that most people do support going to confession. Some similarities between the interviews were that all 3 people said that the services offered by the church were helpful in their relationship with God. However, another similarity was that despite this, they also agreed that the church isn't necessary to have a relationship with Him. Whether or not going to Mass is more helpful than praying is the question that received the most varied responses. I have 1 said yes, 1 said no, and 1 responded neutrally. Another question that received different responses was the one regarding whether or not the church could do more for the poor, because 2 said yes and 1 said no. I was most surprised by the responses regarding whether or not the church was necessary for a relationship with God. I did not expect everyone to agree that it's not, especially after the lecture in class about the spiritual but not religious phenomenon.